Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to your Valentine's Views podcast for Monday, October 3rd. Another victory Monday for your New York Giants as they defeated the Chicago Bears on Sunday to improve to a surprising 3-1 over the first four games of the NFL season. A reminder, if you're listening on the Big Blue View Radio Network, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching us on YouTube, like, share, subscribe there as well. And also, if you're watching us on YouTube as we live stream today, feel free to drop in a comment or a question, and we'll see if we can get to it. I'm joined today, as always, on the day after games by Big Blue View's Tony DelGenio. Tony, you feeling good this morning?
I'm feeling great, Ed. How about you?
I'm feeling good. Here we are again. Doing this two old guys talking ball on a Monday morning. Tony.
Yeah, really. Well, two old guys talking playground ball. I think that's what we're going to be doing for the next hour.
Well, I think that's where we have to start. And this Giants team is 3-1. This team obviously has holes. It obviously lacks playmaking wide receivers, especially with the injuries that they've suffered. The offensive line is obviously a work in progress. The tight end position is a work in progress. The defense has had its fair share of injuries, and yet they're 3-1. And I think a lot of the credit for that absolutely has to go to Brian Daboll and the experienced veteran coaching staff that he's put together.
Absolutely. I think if there was any doubt about whether Brian Daboll was the right hire for the Giants, it's got to be long gone by now. I mean, here's a question. If you had to vote for NFL Coach of the Year today, who would you vote for? Well, probably Nick Sirianni would win it. The Eagles are really come together, but they've got they've got so much talent now on their roster that in one sense you could say, well, it's not surprising. You could say Doug Peterson. He's done a really nice job with Jacksonville, but Brian Daboll has really been a miracle worker with the Giants, and not just Daboll, but the rest of the staff as well. And week in, week out, what you see is that this is a really well coached team. This is a coaching staff that's not fazed by anything. I mean, if you weren't going to be fazed by what happened yesterday by the middle of the game, then you're not going to be fazed by anything, because they're drawing up plays on a grease board on the sideline and running Saquon Barkley at quarterback. And they still managed to move the ball and get another 3 points, by the way, after all that happened, and held on to win the game. So I think it's nothing short of amazing what this staff is doing.
Absolutely. And, I mentioned at Big Blue View this morning that Connor Orr of Sports Illustrated, who once upon a time was a Giants beat writer for NJ Advanced Media, was sitting next to me in the press room the other day. And before the game, he and I were talking, and he leaned over and he said, Brian Daboll is the real deal. And we've seen no evidence to the contrary. Now, obviously, you're not going to put him up there with Bill Parcells and Tom Coughlin and other Giants, great Giants coaches. You're not going to put him there after 4 games. But the evidence is absolutely positive at this point that he was the right hire for the Giants. I got a kick out of something he said in the press conference about drawing up those plays on a grease board, and about he and offensive coordinator Mike Kafka and offensive line coach Bobby Johnson, getting together and going, what do we have? What can we create, with no quarterback, in a running game that'll work. And he was asked about all of that after the game, and he said, what adversity?
Mm-hmm.
You said, what adversity? He said, he said, you just move on. You have to know your players. You have to know what you have. You have to know what you can use, and you just move on to the next play and try to figure out a way.
Yeah, and it really was nothing short of amazing yesterday, and you had to think it was just a matter of time before the Bears were going to come back and take the lead, but they still managed to. Again, the amazing thing to me was that they managed to score points after all this happened, right? And by drawing up some of those wacky plays. Now you have to give a lot of credit to the players also. I mean, I thought Saquon Barkley was again amazing yesterday, even though I don't know if he had any individual plays as spectacular as a couple of ones that we've seen him make, but I thought he was really, really good yesterday. And Daniel Jones been, I think, heroic is the best word that I can give. Out there blocking when Saquon changes direction and goes to the other side of the field, and Jones is out there throwing a block to spring him for a big gain. And we still have no idea who Daniel Jones can be as a passer, and I don't know that we're going to get that this year. But as a player who I think gets the respect of his teammates, I think he's really something. But the thing is, this whole team, though, I think wants to play for this coaching staff, and that's what you see on the field is everybody's out there giving everything they can.
Tony, as we talk, I had mentioned at the top of the show that folks on YouTube could ask questions if they wanted to. And since we're talking about Daniel Jones, a Blue Wave asked us, at the rate the offense is going, how are the Giants going to be able to evaluate Daniel Jones? And look, the way I look at it, like you said, Tony, the way he's played the last 2 weeks is nothing short of heroic. I mean, it doesn't show up in the passing stats, but you evaluate everything. You don't just evaluate passing yards. You evaluate leadership. You evaluate toughness. You evaluate how his teammates feel about him. Jones made plays for the Giants yesterday. And, he had to come back in the game, and at the end and he wasn't able to move. He wasn't, and the Giants didn't feel comfortable in putting him in situations where he would have to throw and try to protect himself, which Joe Judge made that mistake 2 years ago. And, with Jones suffering a hamstring injury and unable to move. And what happened? Jones got beat up and suffered an ankle injury on top of his hamstring injury. And that affected him for the rest of that 2020 season. But I think that what you do with Daniel Jones is all you can do is evaluate him in the context of what he has and what he works with and how he conducts himself and does he make plays. And to this point, I don't think anyone can have a real problem with the way Daniel Jones has played so far this year. Absolutely, 71 yards passing and never getting to 200 yards passing is not sustainable long term. But I think you can only evaluate the guy based on the context of how things are going at this point.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think it's very difficult to play well as a quarterback in the absence of good wide receivers. And the Giants may have some good wide receivers under contract, but at the moment, none of them are getting on the field. So we'll see whether eventually Wan'Dale Robinson comes back, hopefully sooner rather than later, and Kadarius Toney gets back on the field, and so on and so forth. But but right now, there's just not much talent out there for him to utilize, and I don't know that even Aaron Rodgers, who we're going to see next week, would be very successful with the guys that the Giants ran out on the field yesterday. You asked all of the BBV contributing writers earlier in the year to answer the question of what the Giants are going to do with Daniel Jones next year, and I was one of the people that said that I didn't think that they would keep him; they would move on. But I could actually see a scenario the way things are going now, that the Giants decide to put off that decision for yet another year and franchise him, not only because they're seeing other things from him that they might like, and they realize that he doesn't have a wide receiving core and maybe an offensive line this year to succeed, and maybe because the 2023 quarterback class, which everybody thought was going to be so great, doesn't necessarily look that great a few games into the season. And so the idea of, we've got to grab a quarterback in 2023, maybe they'll decide, no, let's wait one more year, franchise them, and see what we can do. A lot of people would say that just be kicking the can down the road one more year, but truly, he's got some assets. And we know that he can pass the ball. He's actually got a good long ball. And, I think that the only questions about Daniel Jones are really whether he can make good decisions in the passing game, and whether he can get to his second, third reads and so on, and eliminate the bad passing decisions. And I'm not sure that we're going to find that out this year. And so what do you do in a situation like that? It's very difficult to imagine what they're going to do right now, but that may be what they're stuck with at the end of the year, having to make a decision again based on not a lot of evidence. And in this case, it may not be Jones's fault that there's not a lot of evidence, because you can't blame him for the sprained ankle yesterday. That was like one too many bootlegs to the opposite side, too many, I thought, the play he got hurt on when he was tackled by Jaquan Brisker. But in the passing game, he's mostly kind of doing what they have asked him to do, given the meager resources he has to do it.
And he has taken care of the ball, and he has made good decisions, with the exception of the interception in the end zone in week 1, to Saquon Barkley, where he went for a back shoulder throw that just wasn't there. And the scenario that I see, Tony, that I've written about is, I think we have to remember that both Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley are eligible for the franchise tag next year. The scenario that I see that could unfold, the franchise tag for quarterbacks next year is estimated to be $31 million. I'm not sure that the Giants want to invest $31 million in a single season in Daniel Jones. The franchise tag for running backs is 12.6 and change. The scenario that I can see unfolding is the Giants franchise tagging Barkley and then turning to Jones if they decide, and maybe it's because they win enough games that they're not high enough in the draft order, to get the quarterback that they might want. But I can see them turning to Jones and trying to get him to agree to maybe a 2-year deal, a lower tier, starting quarterback type deal, pretty much what the Las Vegas Raiders did with Derek Carr a couple of years ago. And I would have to think, for example, if you can get Jones on a 2-year deal at $30 million instead of paying him 1 year and $30 million, that's not bad. But I would have to think that Jones might be amenable to that, for the simple reason that if the Giants move on from him, where's the starting job for him in the NFL?
Mm-hmm. Right. And you could imagine that there's a starting job for him in the NFL somewhere. I mean, there are other teams that have a bad quarterback situation also. I just don't know that they'd go in that particular direction to try to fix it. They'd be more likely to take a flyer on a quarterback, maybe even after the first round, the way a couple of teams did in this past draft. Yeah, I could see that. I maybe another example or parallel for the Giants is what the 49ers wound up doing with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think his contract is $27 million or something like that, 28 million a year. So kind of similar. And of course they tried to trade him, but couldn't. And then a game or two into the NFL season, they find themselves turning back to him now for the rest of the year since Lance is hurt. And so, yeah, I could imagine the Giants trying to do something like that with Jones.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I think we have to talk about Saquon for a couple of minutes. As of this morning, he leads the NFL in rushing, and he's obviously, I wondered if he could be the Saquon Barkley of old. And to be entirely honest, I just didn't think I wasn't sure he could get there. I think he's gotten there. The 15-yard pass reception that he had yesterday, that play had disaster written all over it. It was a 10-yard loss as soon as he caught the ball. It was a 15-yard loss as soon as he started going backward. Then all of a sudden, Daniel Jones is throwing a block, and it's a 15-yard run for a first down.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, that's Saquon being Saquon. That's Saquon, when he was fully healthy, doing Saquon Barkley kinds of things. What I was really impressed with yesterday is that might have been the most workmanlike game I've ever seen from Saquon Barkley. That's a career-high 31 carries. That's slamming the ball up the middle. That's slashing off tackle and getting 3 yards here and 4 yards there and making guys miss, in the hole, and advancing the football and helping the Giants score points when everybody on the other side of the field knew he was about to get the football. And for me, that is what you need from a number one back, from a franchise back, from a superstar, is being able to produce. And it's not necessarily the 60-yard run, but being able to produce first downs and help your team win games when the other team knows that you're all the offense that they've got.
Mm-hmm. I think you can make the argument, and I started thinking about this after the game yesterday. I think you can, everybody was talking about, can he get back to his 2018 form? So I think, that question is answered now. I don't think there are any doubts. Here's the question I'll pose. Is he actually playing better than he did in 2018? I think he's actually playing better than he did.
I won't argue with that. And I'm glad you went there, because I actually meant to say that. I think what we saw yesterday, I think, to me, is the best Saquon Barkley that maybe I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. He's really doing everything, and I feel like they still haven't fully utilized him in the passing game. I mean, if you remember his rookie year, Pat Shurmur used to draw up downfield passes to Barkley, which you haven't really seen much or any of this season so far. And again, if we get to a point where the offensive line is pass blocking adequately, and it's hard for me to imagine that they wouldn't make some use of him on plays like that, especially since the Giants don't have too many options in the downfield passing game. But we know that he's capable of all those things. We know that he can take a little screen pass and take it to the house, but we also know that he can go downfield and catch passes as well, which again, he did a decent amount in 2018. And so I think really they haven't even fully tapped his potential yet. And I feel like he's playing with a high level of confidence. I think he's got an offensive line that is starting to become a good run blocking offensive line. That's another thing. I mean, we talk about the offensive line problems, but I really feel like the run blocking has picked up the last couple of weeks by this line. And I think he wants it, right? I think he wants it. I think he knows that he's got a chance to have an all-time great season. I mean, right now he's heading for a total yards from scrimmage, which could be, up there in the top 10 all time. He could break the Giants record that was set by Tiki Barber back in, I think it was 2005 or something like that. Tiki got like 2,390 total yards from scrimmage that year. Well, Barkley could actually approach that or even pass it this year, which would be one of the great seasons ever by a running back. And so going back to your idea about using the franchise tag for Barkley rather than Jones, that would make a lot of sense to me also, because as you say, you're only talking about $12-13 million. And people say, well, you shouldn't pay that much for a running back. But really, Barkley is, or can be, actually more than a running back. And so I think there's a difference between a running back who only runs the ball and a running back who can catch passes as well. And when you have that dual threat running back, the idea of 12-13 mil, I don't see that that's a problem.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about Barkley, and there are people out there who are going to call me a hater for this because they already think I hate this particular player, but I would rather have the ball thrown to Saquon Barkley any day of the week on any play, any time, rather than have the Giants throw the ball anywhere near the direction of Darius Slayton.
Yeah, well, Darius. I'm not a Darius Slayton hater, but I have to admit that there's very very little recent evidence of him being able to produce for the Giants, and his days are looking like they're numbered. He needs to make a few catches pretty quickly, and in order, I think, to start changing people's minds. But don't have many choices for who to go to in the passing game these days. And so again, maybe they're going to start to use Barkley downfield when we'll see who's playing quarterback next Sunday.
Sure. Speaking of that situation, Tony, I think before we talk about the defense and talk about Dexter Lawrence and talk about the effort that they put forth on that side of the ball, I have to ask, are you looking forward to seeing Davis Webb up against Aaron Rodgers next Sunday in London?
Well, I tweeted yesterday that next Sunday we have coming up the matchup everyone's been waiting for of the two Cal quarterback legends, Davis Webb and Aaron Rodgers. So you know what? I'll say this much: if Davis Webb does start the game, then I'd say good for him. The poor guy has been in the league for, what is it now? Is it 5 years or something?
2017. Yeah,
2017. He was drafted by the Giants, and it wasn't his fault that he got overdrafted by Dave Gettleman. If they had taken him a round or two later, I think nobody would have been complaining about it. He's been a good soldier. He's done what he had to do, and the guy's yet to throw a pass in the NFL. And so let him start next Sunday. Let him throw some passes. I'll take it. And I don't imagine that he's going to be a great success story, but I think next Sunday it's all gravy. No one expected the Giants to beat Green Bay at the beginning of the season. I don't necessarily see any reason to change my opinion on that. That having been said, the Green Bay Packers are not the Green Bay Packers that we know from the past. Their offense is less dangerous. I think it's going to become dangerous eventually, but right now they're missing Devontae Adams. They've got a couple of young, very talented rookie wide receivers, but it's taking them some time to come into their own. And the fact is that the Patriots yesterday, who had Bailey Zappi coming in cold at quarterback, almost beat them. And so I'm not going to bet any money on the Giants beating the Packers or even covering the whatever it is 7.5 point spread, but I could imagine the Giants giving Packers a game.
Sure. And the one thing I will say about Davis Webb is that the one benefit that the Giants have if Webb has to play is that Webb has been with Brian Daboll now for so long, and he has a mobile enough skill set that if Webb has to play, you're not running a streamlined vanilla playbook, for a guy that's been there for 3 weeks, like the Giants had to do last year with Jake Fromm. The entire playbook is open for Davis Webb. And we saw in the preseason that Brian Daboll knows him well enough to understand what Webb can and can't do. So knowing what we've seen from this coaching staff, if Webb has to play, there will be a plan in place that gives him a chance to succeed, that gives him an opportunity to do things he does well. And it won't be like, well, he only knows 5 of our pass plays and 2 of our run plays, and that's the entire offense.
Right. And really, again, I think the offensive line is starting to come along, at least in run blocking. And, I thought they did a little bit better yesterday in pass protection also, although yesterday's game wasn't really a good game to evaluate pass protection. And so, again, they do another kind of run heavy game plan with some creativity from Kafka and Daboll there. If you get some pass rush that Wink can dial up to fluster Rodgers a little bit, So, it's a game they could conceivably keep close, and teams often don't play well when they travel over to London, and so regardless of what the odds are, I think you have no idea how things are going to turn out. But they're playing with house money next week. Okay, there's
Uh,
no one thinks they can win. If they get blown out, everybody will say, of course, everybody's injured. No wonder they got blown out by Aaron Rodgers. So, they there's no way that they can, I think, disappoint next week. Either it's going to be a terrible game or they keep it close, and people will be amazed that they keep it close.
Absolutely. Hey, Tony, before we move over to talk quickly about the defense, Blue Wave tossed us another question. He asked us, do we think that Kadarius Toney will be part of this roster next year? And I'll take that first. And my answer to that is no. 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 I do not think that this regime would have drafted Kadarius Toney. They can say whatever they want in public about Kadarius Toney, but I can't see it. I think that unless Kadarius Toney gets healthy here in another week or two, stays healthy, and has a monstrous last 2/3 to 3/4 of the season, I just don't see it. I think that Shane and Daboll would look to get what they can, even if it's a late round draft pick or two, and move on and build around guys that they think that they can rely on.
So I think it all comes down, in my opinion, I think it all comes down to how soon he gets back and does he stay on the field. His senior year at Florida, he stayed on the field all year, and he was spectacular that season. So we've seen him be able to get through an entire season, just not yet at the NFL level. And if he comes back and plays for the rest of the year and plays well, then I do think he comes back next year. I mean, they'll still have him on a rookie contract. It's they don't have many options yet. We'll see what they do at the wide receiver position next year, and obviously it depends on the other guys too. Now we're in the same situation with Wan'Dale Robinson. Is he going to get back soon? Will he stay healthy for the year? Will he be a productive member of the offense? I think we've got a long way to go yet before that question's answered. I am a Kadarius Toney fan, despite all of the weirdness that has happened since he's been a Giant. And I'd like to see him stay a Giant. But I agree that if we have another season where he winds up appearing in, let's say, 5 games total or something like that, and doesn't do anything, that they will move on. I think it's all a matter of the injury situation.
Absolutely. Tony, let's talk about the defense a little bit. And we know what the Giants were up against on Sunday, a team that really is a one-dimensional running team, has Darnell Mooney, made a couple of plays in the passing game, but nothing that really cost the Giants in terms of touchdowns. They kept Chicago out of the end zone. This was going to be a toughness test for the Giants, coming off 2 games where they really didn't defend the run well, especially in Dallas on Monday night. And they knew that. Dexter Lawrence said to me after the game, he said, this was a test of our toughness. We knew what was coming. We knew what we had to do. And yardage-wise, I think the Giants gave up 149 yards rushing. Maybe that doesn't look great, but they didn't give up any splash plays. They didn't give up any big plays. They made the plays they needed to make when they had to keep Chicago out of the end zone. I think they had 6 sacks. They had the big strip sack by Azeez Ojulari. For me, I look at it and I thought that the entire front 7 was terrific.
Mm-hmm. And again, you have to remember they're playing without Leonard Williams, and
Absolutely.
For all the criticism that Leonard Williams has taken throughout his pro career, actually, but specifically since he became a Giant, all that criticism is about what we gave up for him and the size of the contract that he was signed for. If you can forget about those for a minute and just think about the guy as a football player, he's one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL, and he's stout against the run, and him not being in there hurts. So there's no question about how much they miss Leonard Williams. That having been said, I'd say Dexter Lawrence was a monster yesterday. I think that's the best game I've ever seen him play as a Giant. I'm hard pressed to think of one that I thought he was more of a disrupting influence than what we saw yesterday. And I think the rest of the Giants' defensive line played pretty well too. So Nick Williams make a couple of good plays in there, and then I think that the linebackers did better in run support. Tay Crowder, in particular, I thought played his best game of the year yesterday, and I feel like the Giants' edge rushers are starting to come on. They're doing okay in setting the edge on the run a lot of the time, and they're starting now, I think, to get more consistent pressure on the quarterback. So I think that's coming too. So I was pretty satisfied with the Giants' front seven, and I feel like once Leonard Williams comes back. Hope that Ojulari's tweaking his calf is not something that keeps him out now for more time. He seemed to indicate that it wasn't a big deal yesterday. I feel like the front seven is going to be very good for the Giants going forward.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you can look at people trash Tay Crowder all the time. Tay Crowder was really, really good on Sunday. You have to recognize that. I mean, he may not be an all-pro linebacker, but he was really, really good on Sunday in what he was asked to do. Jalen Smith just re-signed, just added to the 53, showed some range, made some plays, getting tackle to tackle yesterday, got in the backfield a couple times. He was an upgrade. Kayvon Thibodeau had an impact. Made a really nice heads-up play to pick up the fumble recovery. Got in the backfield a couple times. He's going to become a roughing the passer machine, though. If he keeps making a couple of the hits that he made yesterday. Got penalized once. Probably should have gotten penalized a second time, but he and Ojulari played well. Jihad Ward is a much better player than I ever realized.
Yeah.
The guy that the Giants signed in the offseason who I knew nothing about. Those guys all did a good job yesterday, but Dexter Lawrence is the guy that we have to talk about. You're absolutely right. This guy was a monster yesterday. Absolutely the best game he's played in his 4 years as a Giant. And I watch him play, and I watched him play yesterday, and I can't help but think about, talking to him in training camp and talking to him about the fact that he's been good for 3 years, but that there's another level, that he hasn't reached that level of greatness, that Pro Bowl, all pro level. And he talked about wanting to reach that level. And Andre Patterson, the defensive line coach, helping him with his mindset and helping him reach that level. And he talked about wrecking games. And he absolutely wrecked that game yesterday for the Chicago Bears. He's absolutely playing, in my mind, the best football of his life at this point.
Yeah. And of course, for Giants fans, the problem with Dexter Lawrence is that there were a lot of IDLs drafted in the first round that year in 2019, and Giants could have had Jeffrey Simmons, who was taken after Dexter Lawrence, and Jeffrey Simmons has been a monster for a good part of his career. And so I think Dexter Lawrence, in the minds of Giants fans, will always be compared to Jeffrey Simmons. Well, Dexter Lawrence looked like Jeffrey Simmons yesterday, I thought. And if he can do that on anything like a consistent basis, then that just opens up such tremendous possibilities with him and Leonard Williams there together on the defensive line. Of course, the Giants did pick up a 5th-year option on him next year, and so they're going to have a decision to make about whether to keep him. Well, if he plays like this, they're definitely going to be keeping him, and he'll be getting a nice contract from them also. And yeah, I think interior defensive linemen, we went through a couple of years where they seemed to have become less important to the defense than other positions. But I think there's been maybe a little bit of a renaissance in the last year or so in that position, and people are realizing how important it is to be stout up the middle. And Dexter Lawrence is playing like a guy who wants to be here and will be here for a few years, not after this year.
Absolutely. And there's one other thing that I need to say about Dexter Lawrence, and Giants fans remember Snacks Harrison, of course. Okay. And Snacks Harrison, in some ways, a similar player to Dexter, although I think Dexter has much more pass rush ability than Snacks ever did. Snacks Harrison had 2 or 3 terrific seasons for the Giants, but there but he also played for the Giants at a time when they were downtrodden, and in a way, and maybe this is not completely fair to Snacks Harrison at this point, but Snacks Harrison in the locker room would be asked about leadership. He would be asked about being a veteran and being one of the better players, and trying to lead this team and trying to help the Giants learn to win. And Snacks Harrison would bluntly say, I'm not a leader, period. I just play, which is what he would say when he wasn't blowing reporters off and walking away from them. Dexter Lawrence stands at his locker, talks to media. Dexter Lawrence said to me last night in response to a question, he said, I'm a leader on this football team. He said, it's my job to make sure these guys are ready to play. It's my job to run on the field as fast as I can, to be excited when I'm out there, to be ready to play hard on every play. And for me, for this football team, for a core player that the Giants drafted with a first-round pick, and he's still on his rookie contract. For me, I love that attitude and that stand-up, mentality, almost, if not more, than I love the play on the field.
Yeah, and I think it's got to be really exciting for all Giants fans to see what he's doing this year, and he's looking like a first-round draft choice. And so, and again, with drafted players, as fans, of course, we expect them to be stars right away, and some of them don't. For Dexter Lawrence, I mean, he's always been solid. Even as a rookie, he was solid. His problem was that he was a first-round pick, and again, he was a first-round pick that suffered by comparison to another first-round pick that was taken a few slots after him. He's never played poorly for the Giants. He's always been an above-average player for the Giants, and so if what we're seeing this year is any indication, now he's ascending from being an above average player to being an elite player. And props to him for trying to improve himself all the time, but maybe also props to Brian Daboll and company for getting Andre Patterson on board on the staff, because again, Andre Patterson seems to be another excellent coaching hire by the Giants on a staff that seems to be full of very good coaches. And if if he's having this effect on Dexter Lawrence, then wow, it's amazing.
Absolutely, Tony. And let's finish up with this 3-1 after what is as close to the quarter pole of the season as we're going to get. This is obviously still not a finished product, and with this team, there's obviously still a lot of holes on this roster, and I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but I'm still looking at this team and thinking, this is really nice. This is good to win. It helps everyone. It helps Brian Daboll establish his program and his credibility and all of those things. But I still think that, as you pointed out, the Giants are pretty healthy underdogs on Sunday. They're probably going to be pretty healthy underdogs the week after that against the Ravens. I think they're playing in week 6. And, this is still a team that's a work in progress, that's developing. And I still want to caution Giants fans, don't be looking at this team and don't be disappointed if this team doesn't win 12 games. If there's a point in this season where where the talent level really begins to show, and the Giants can't continue to scheme around it and win games. They're a work in progress. I look at the wins as being fantastic because it's nice to write and talk and about a winning team for a change, but it's a work in progress and it's about the future still. It's not necessarily about where this ends up in 2022.
Yeah, I could imagine the Giants losing most of their remaining games still, especially if they continue to have bad luck with injuries. If more guys get injured, if some of the guys who've been injured, who are quote unquote day to day, as Daboll always says about anyone who's not out.
If you're not dead, you're day to day.
If those guys aren't back for 6 weeks or something like that, then eventually there's just so much attrition that you just can't put a decent team on the field anymore, and their chances of winning, I think, get very low. That having been said, they, after the next couple of weeks, which are going to be obviously pretty tough games for the Giants to win, after that, the rest of their season isn't all that bad. And so if they get some of the injured guys back, they can compete in some of those games. My prediction for them at the beginning of the season was 7-10. I'll stand by that 7-10, even though they're 3-1 now, because I think they've got some hard times ahead of them. But what Giants fans will never forget is the surrender formation at the end of last season when head coach delivered the message, "I'm not even trying to win." Brian Daboll does not deliver that message. And so as long as I think fans continue to see them trying to win with what they've got, then people will be happy. Everyone knows that the personnel is not up to snuff and the injuries are terrible. So just keep on trying to win, even if you don't every week.
Absolutely, Tony. I think that's well said, and that is a great place for us to end this episode of the Valentine's Views podcast. Tony, thank you as always. Giants fans, thank you for listening. Please stay safe out there, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.